Here's Jacob. He's uploading documents to the cloud and chatting notes to his outside agency partners. This is Zoe. She's rushing to share the customer list with marketing and is sending the latest product roadmap to her mobile device. Which one of them is creating insider risk? They both are. Everyone creates insider risk, sometimes with malicious intent and sometimes just by doing their jobs. Empower productivity and protect your data with Code 42 Insider. Visit securityweekly.com/Code 42 to learn more. When it comes to web app and API security, the choice is simple. You can choose Fastly's security solution that teams will actually use in full blocking mode, just like 90% of their customers. Or you can stick with costly options that you probably just turn off. You can get Fastly's all-in-one platform that protects apps everywhere they live, however they're built. Or departments can agree to disagree. You can go to securityweekly.com/Fastly to learn more. Or you can just wish you had. Searching for the best way to protect passwords and privileged accounts? Thycotic empowers security and IT operation teams to discover, secure, and manage all types of privileged accounts with the fastest time to value of any privileged access management solution. Get up and running fast with solutions for privileged account discovery, turnkey installation, automation, auditing, and reporting tools with Thycotic's free 30-day trial. Thycotic, the fastest growing PAM provider in the market, available both on-premise and in the cloud. Get started today with a free Thycotic secret server trial at securityweekly.com/Thycotic.
Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. This episode is also known as Between the Two Tylers. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Tyler Shields and Tyler Robinson. Security Weekly listeners save $100 on their RSA Conference 2021 All Access Pass. RSA Conference will be a fully virtual experience from May 17th to the 20th. Security Weekly will be live streaming Monday through Thursday in Virtual Broadcast Alley, interviewing some of the top sponsors and speakers for the event. To register using our discount code, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC 2021 and use the code 5U1Cyber. We hope to see you there. And it's official. Last week we launched Security Weekly Labs with our first set of product reviews on attack surface monitoring. To see an overview of the category definition, our testing methodology, or the actual product reviews, please visit securityweekly.com/reviews. All right. Let's see. Let's get to the news. So I posted all the news articles. There's like 17 of them. I think we should just go in order because I kind of grouped them so it was a little easier to get through. And since I'm the only one that did it, we don't have to go back and forth. So let's see. Pivot 3 simplifies and unifies management of physical security infrastructure with new surety software.
What does that mean?
That's a mouthful. Yeah. Well, so I had to go out to their website and figure out who Pivot 3 was. It's like video recording and analytic. I think it's a replacement for SolarWinds. Like I think it's more of like a management platform. And I think they're going after the whole SolarWinds debacle and created some of these new capabilities for remote management and monitoring of your physical infrastructure. That's kind of the way I read this one, Tyler's.
Interesting.
That will not cease to be confusing for the rest of this episode. Yeah, it's definitely a weird website, weird press release as far as details and lack thereof. So it's claims to be an all-in-one IT infrastructure surveillance system. They have some customers listed off as school customers, city of Bogota as a customer. So, it just feels a bit like a Big Brother-y video monitoring and then overlaid with big data and ML maybe. But it seems like
it could be some IoT too.
What'd you say, Tyler?
It seems like they have some IoT in there too. So, like, are we talking physical security as in like door access badging, video surveillance in conjunction with face recognition? Like, there's not a ton of info on this, but it is kind of interesting.
So yeah, and it talks about servers and appliances too. Yeah.
Well, what's exciting to me about this particular one of the graphics they use on their website? They have like cars going by with little bullseyes on them. It's like super straight out of CSI something or other, tracking people, and the way the CIA tracks people. So definitely could be an interesting idea if it actually works.
Yeah.
But you're right. They do talk about data center and NVMe flash, and like, what is the data center actually securing if it's physical? Like, this is the most confusing website I think I've been on for a while.
No, I got another one for you in a second, but I see these guys as kind of more of an IT management company that's moved into security. We've seen other companies make that shift, right? And with SolarWinds attack, people might be looking for a replacement. So I think they're trying to maybe beef up some capabilities. But this next article really got me confused, because I'm like, who the heck is Safety Group? So Safety Group's Zone Zero cybersecurity solution approved for federal government purchases by the US GSA. I go to their website. I can't figure out what they do. They talk about so much stuff here. I'm like, what does Safety Group do? Do they do everything? I think they do everything.
Yeah, there's a ton of info here too.
Yes.
Yeah, no, this one's buzzword bingo for sure, and it's jumping out at me. The first thing that came to my mind is the safety dance, and that's what was going on in my head when I went to their website. But that was quickly dispelled by buzzword bingo and zero trust and all these buzzy terms that they claim to have here. And they have a NASDAQ market ticker across the top, which I guess implies that they're publicly traded with a market cap of 35 million.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like, why did you go public with a $35 million market?
Yeah,
their stock's like trading at like $1.35. Yeah,
super confusing. What they even
They've
do.
They've got a nice list of clients and partners, though. We'll say I don't recognize any of those logos, but that's an interesting move, obviously, to keep bolstering that market.
Yeah, I think they're very Fed focused here, which is why this announcement was so important to them. I think by getting on the GSA schedules, it makes it easier for them to get into some of these government agencies. My guess is these guys are really kind of focused more into the government sector with some solutions. But again, trying to figure out all the things they do, there's just so much here. I'm like, yeah, you basically do everything. You're public, okay, but your stock's trading at like $1.35.
They have a half a dozen journalists on their team page, which is interesting too. Like, yeah, I'm not sure why you would need journalists, analysts, equities reporters. So maybe we're just confused about what they do at all.
Maybe.
Their Zone Zero product looks interesting. Looking at it, it's just like any other zero trust model, where they've actually simplified it even further with a VPN and MFA, where they're just passing tunnels via this application or client, which, like, again, nothing new from a zero trust model that everybody's trying to hop on.
Yeah. Interesting. Now we get to some really fun news. HackerOne enhances their security testing platform. So here, HackerOne's made some improvements around some of their assessments and vulnerability reports. I mean, I haven't spent much time on the HackerOne platform. I assume, Mr. Robinson, you probably know the platform a little better than I do.
Yeah, the enhancement's nice, because inside the old platform, a lot of what you needed to report was very templatized, and sometimes when you're getting into very boutique or even some more advanced hacks, some of the details you have to provide didn't always fit into the field. So they allow you to do some customized fields. They're making it faster to report, a little bit more streamlined. I think this one is kind of setting it up to a more standardized pen test model, where you've got the ability to put in as much info as you need, have those custom fields if you're going to report a little different, while still maintaining the information that they have to provide to the client. Because that's their big play, right? Is they handle all the client interaction, and in order to do that effectively, like having sat in the management chair and having to pass info from very technical teams, you require a very specific set of information to pass to management or large companies that are part of these programs. And so these briefings and templatized, like being able to automate some of that, while still having the flexibility of not taking away creativity from the hackers that they're now employing, which some of them, are either in-state or not, maybe speak English, don't have a traditional pen test background or don't. They had to kind of accommodate to a lot of that.
Yeah, I also saw some advanced workflows and the remediation insight as some enhancements there. Again, I think to your point, to automate some of the reporting capabilities from the hacker community to get those reports delivered to the right people. And, everybody wants to know, well, okay, you identified this. How do I remediate? So the integration of some of that remediation data looks to help kind of bolster the findings.
Yeah, I think they also provided some of their new analytics. I know they were working on some dashboard stuff for like time to mitigation or remediation effort levels. Like those are things that have always been included with inside good pen test reports. Like how long is it going to take us to remediate? What's the level of effort? How much expertise do we need on the team to do this? And some of those obviously were missing with inside of some of the initial traditional means of reporting a bug. And that goes into some of the cloud stuff that they're having to deal with between AppSec and cloud, like we were just talking on the last segment. That has significantly changed in both the time that you have to get this right, as well as how you have to report this and some of the technologies that you are reporting it against. Those are different than some of the traditional pen tests.
Right. Atos unveils Global R&D Lab to drive innovation in cybersecurity, high-performance computing, and quantum. So Atos opened this new facility outside of Paris in Yvelines to kind of focus on some more advanced research. And it seemed to be quantum was a big part of this was, as quantum computing kind of continues. We know it's still a little far off, but it looks like Atos is going to do some research in this area, as we think about encryption keys and some of the challenges with quantum in the near future. So they're kind of interesting. They're kind of putting some R&D into this area.
I think the Q-score was interesting as well, right? Like they came up with a quantum metric right out of the gate. Like that's kind of cool. I think getting some of that standardized early. Like you said, quantum is here to stay. It is already here and being utilized, but I don't see a ton of companies. Like it's always, we'll have to address that when quantum's a bigger risk factor. Well, I think it's kind of at that point we have to think for the future. So getting some of these metrics and some of these fundamental frameworks and standards built out up front so we can enhance them and make them much better than I'm sure what they are initially is going to be an important key aspect.
Yeah, the other interesting thing in that press release is they talk about standing up the group, the team, the location, the quantum Q-score stuff that T-Rob mentioned. But also that they're going to focus on global warming, which I thought was really interesting thing to call out in a good paragraph, 2 paragraphs of that press release. So quantum obviously has impacts on climate, which they're willing to address. So it's kind of interesting.
It sounds like just from the release, it sounds like they kind of have an idea of what they're doing, and they've thought about a few of the things that are going to come up from an innovation standpoint. And I'm curious how they're going to take something like this and the R&D around this and then either monetize it or sustain it, right? Like that's one of the hard things with R&D is really figuring out the business use case and goal and how you utilize that for further funding and continuing that R&D.
Right, because can I take some of that research and build product capabilities, Atos being a service provider, or other services wrapped around it to kind of continue to fuel it will be the interesting question, for sure.
Yeah, one to keep an eye on.
Yes. Palo Alto Networks expands Unit 42 Cybersecurity Consulting Group. This is from their Crypsis acquisition, integration of them into the Unit 42 group. What I find interesting here is, is this to go after the FireEye Mandiant kind of service structure? Because it looks like Unit 42 is building out a set of incident response service capabilities under the Palo Alto brand.
Which is super interesting. Like Unit 42, I have the utmost respect for, like from a group that does really good work, very unbiased and knows their stuff. Like Unit 42 is some of the top tier. And then you add some of the capability from Crypsis. Crypsis is fantastic. Those guys and the leadership over there, they really do a great job. That kind of combination that they've built and tiering that threat intelligence to, like you said, potentially an incident response and or I see this as maybe a breach management consultancy. I think this is actually a pretty big play to a big market that's needed some shifting and a little bit of competition.
Yeah. I see this as kind of a shot over the bow at the FireEye Mandiant team to say, look, there's some other folks in the industry that are going to come in and help, around incident response, breach, forensics, etc. Right?
Yeah,
especially with Unit 42.
It's for sure
Tyler?
a shot over the bow. I agree, Matt. It's a shot over the bow specifically because, taking a shot at FireEye Mandiant, but also, Palo Alto does a really good job they did a great job of reinventing themselves into a cloud native competitive offering from a product standpoint from what used to be an old stodgy, network hardware type of company. And they've done a good job of making that flip. And now it's a matter of how do we extend our brand recognition beyond what we currently have and get into the upper echelon? And I think it's a natural extension for them to make this move.
Yeah. On top of that, they're leveraging a lot of their telemetry data from, not only their firewall brand, but like Unit 42 and the threat analytics that they're pulling in for their feeds. Those playing into both of those and then providing a service offering around a lot of that for the brand. That's pretty powerful, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's even wider than that, because when you take the Prisma aspects with the Cortex aspects, I mean, they have a lot of purview in all the acquisitions they've done over the years to create the Prisma Cloud and the Cortex business lines, right? And you think about all that telemetry coming into something like Unit 42 with their additional capabilities. They have a really strong offering in the space. And to your point, Mr. Shields, it's been impressive to watch Palo Alto acquire these pieces and assemble them into kind of their next evolution of strategy, because the firewall business as we know it is dying fast, and they had to reinvent themselves, and they definitely went out and did it.
Yeah, they did a good job of assembling those companies, merging them. I mean, at the end of the day, that's a difficult thing to do. Most companies fail when they have to go the acquisition route for innovation, but it feels like they did a reasonable job. They just acquired the right companies at the right time and then continued to allow them to do their own thing and grow them. The question then becomes, how do we level that up? How do we pull the data? How do we pull everything into a unified, Prisma Cloud, an actual Prisma Cloud that works well in a unified way? And I think they're well along that path. And if they can be successful there,
right. Thoma Bravo, back in the news. Last week they did the combination of Thycotic and Centrify, right? Now they go out and they say, look, we're going to take Proofpoint Private in a $12.3 billion deal. I mean, this is maybe the second time they've done this. They took, who they take out of the public market a couple years back. I mean, so Tomoe Bravo said, Proofpoint, come on, we'll just take you private. They've been buying up properties like crazy. This is just really interesting to me, and it's going to impact my Security Weekly 25 index when this happens, because Proofpoint's currently in my index, and they're going to have to come out.
Yeah, that's an interesting acquisition, especially for that amount of money. Like Proofpoint's always been head of the market for, good platform from a spam reduction. They've only got a few other players that are doing a really good job, but I think this in combination with NoBefore's evaluation are two very interesting market points that are completely different.
True. It is. And I think it was Imperva. I think Thoma Bravo took Imperva out 2 years ago. And we saw Foresight come out of the market in a private equity deal last year. So it's interesting. You've got some of these early players that came out into the public space, kind of going back private. And then you've got these newer startups like NoBefore and Darktrace, which we'll get to at the end of this segment, coming into the public market. Just very interesting points to think about in the overall public market for cybersecurity.
Yeah, the Imperva takeout was, I think, a little over $2 billion. I think that's what it was, if I remember correctly. But if $12 billion is a whole different matter, a much larger play. The valuations have just skyrocketed in both public and private markets. So it'll be interesting to continue to monitor how that impacts these companies.
Oh, agreed. I mean, we were even talking about it internally the other day on our exec call. The valuations for acquisitions are going up a lot. Yep. Makes it difficult to execute on acquisition strategies some days when the multiples are so rich in the space.
Makes me wonder what they're planning on doing from an advisory board or shifting around of the company, and what their focus may end up being able to change from or to based on some of that control they gain back from going private. Like, do they have things in the works that allows that private acquisition to further that growth path or that roadmap, or was this a play to kind of adjust leadership and strategically advance something that maybe we don't know about?
Yeah, and this is where I think Thoma Bravo has been doing some very interesting stuff. Like I said, Logarithm, Imperva, Centrify, the whole Thycotic Centrify merger last week we announced. Now they bring in Proofpoint. So we don't know, but do you see another combination of a Proofpoint and somebody else in the portfolio merging together and spinning out a whole new company or a whole new set of capabilities? That's where Thoma Bravo, they have a plan. I don't think we all get to understand what it is, but they've made a lot of interesting acquisitions. And what I thought was very interesting was the Centrify Thycotic merger last week to spin that entity kind of back out as a new player in the space. There might be some more architecture crafting under the covers at Thoma Bravo.
Yeah, for sure. And if you jump ahead by 2 articles too, you've got the Illumio in talks to raise fund from Thoma Bravo at 2.9 billion valuation as well. So clearly they're making multiple moves and not just one. And it's likely some kind of roll up, push together, jam together type of play, or trim the fat and recalibrate. So tough to tell.
Yeah, and Proofpoint's, when you think about what Proofpoint's done over the years, that portfolio has gotten big, but it's also gotten a little stale,
diluted-ish.
Yeah, and so this could be an opportunity to take some pieces, put it over on the side, and kind of milk it, and take some of the more innovative stuff they've done and maybe roll it with something else. I mean, I could see this coming out in a few different variations, but I think some of the stagnant innovation at Proofpoint could be one reason why they're doing this, and they could see breaking some pieces up and rolling them with other parts of the portfolio. Always fun to speculate. Let's see. Coalfire acquires Neuralis pen testing platform. So this is an interesting move. I mean, the Coalfire team, early days, heavily focused on PCI, have built a lot of service capabilities and advisory capabilities. Here they buy a pen testing platform, Mr. Robinson. I don't know if you've used Neuralis or not, but I thought it was a pretty interesting acquisition for them. Oh, we lost him. I hear the beep. That means he lost his network. I can't hear Shields. Tyler?
Yeah, that's what happens when you forget to come off mute, everyone, on a podcast. That was 100% my fault. So the interesting thing I think about the Coalfire stuff is if you look at the entire list of news articles for today, it feels like a lot of them are around pen testing, automated pen testing, crowdsource-based pen testing. All of those different kinds of things seem to be rolled up into a number of different storylines this week. I don't know much about that space. It's not my space. I tend to play in the cloud a little bit more, keep my head in the clouds, so to speak. But I think the pen testing platform play is something we're seeing a lot of, and it's a matter of how does it fit into the bigger picture for other companies, and does it make sense to roll them in? In this case, it sounds like it might. In the previous one we were just reading earlier, whichever one that was, sounds like it might as well. The HackerOne enhancing their stuff. Mm-hmm. I just think it's just a hot area right now for roll-ups, and I think the valuations on some of these pen testing platforms are a little bit lower than others would see for other sub-genres of security.
Yeah, because when you think about pen testing from a services perspective, the valuation on a services-based business is going to be at a different multiple than a pure kind of product play, and so there are some interesting acquisitions here. We saw, Bishop Fox kind of get funded. What was it, last year or the year before? Really rolling out not just as a pen testing company, but also adding some product capabilities to the portfolio. So you even see the pen testing companies kind of reinventing themselves a little bit, offering either additional services or start to offer some product capabilities in this space.
They almost have to, because the margins on pen testing services are so low. Because it's human driven with human scale, and they don't get the the margin multiple that you get by having automated software as much. So, Cobalt, the one you just mentioned, and the bulk of these kind of Bishop Fox, these Bishop Fox, I spoke with them a few weeks ago, and they're doing some really awesome stuff around, I forget what they call their platform, Pact or Safe or something like that. It's a 4-letter thing that had an acronym, but they're doing really cool technologies on automating pen testing, automating, operational kind of red teaming side of the business. So, it just makes sense from a margin perspective for these guys.
I think it always has to be somewhat automated, and you see a lot of companies moving to that automation, not just offensive companies, but services companies, because there is no great way to scale that. And even if you can scale it, you end up with a talent issue, where in order to have capable talent and or scalable top tier boutique offerings, that becomes very difficult in today's market. And so getting some of that automation, that's kind of the golden liner. Everybody's trying to automate red teaming, automate pen testing. And there's a lot of services that are going to do that and get that kind of top 70% of the things you need to do, which is fine. We need to see that. We need to see improvement. We need to see advancement in speed, capabilities improve around that. There will be always a need for pen tests. There's always going to be that human level of effort where you can't take that decision making away. We've seen that with ML and AI. Like, you will probably never get rid of some of the top level or more sophisticated things that have to be tested. But if you can eliminate 70%, that frees up a ton of time and resource to focus on the things that need to be done by the human, where it makes sense to do it.
Yep. Let's see. BlackRock, Tudor Group back cybersecurity startup Deep Instinct with $100 million investment. I'm trying to figure out what Deep Instinct. It's they talk about deep learning, not just AI. Is this an analytics play?
I think it's a threat intelligence analytics, like where they're taking in a lot of data from multiple feed sources and providing threat analytics and or network awareness around the threat analytics, if I remember right. It's been a little while since I looked at it.
Yeah, they call it zero-time threat prevention platform, whatever that means.
So analytic behavior and like they're using AI, learning your network, similar to what Darktrace kind of does. Where they're using some of that learning and understanding your network, what's normal, what's not normal, and then tying that in with additional threat intelligence feeds to kind of build that quick reaction and quick anomalous behavior detection. Which is,
so I was wondering if they were like a Darktrace.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And what's interesting from a financial perspective on this one is they were founded in 2015, had $92 million invested to date, and this doubles their investment. So in 6 years, they've gotten to $200 million in investments across, looks like 4 rounds in 2 years. That's super fast. So I'd also, if you read the article, I think it said that they're approaching, did it say they're approaching $100 million in ARR? I may have misread that, but they're growing very, very quickly.
They're growing quickly. It's surprising there's not a bigger brand awareness around them. Like, I only know of them because I've done a little work looking at them, but
yeah, it's interesting. I'd never heard of them, and for them to be at $100 million in revenue, or they say they're likely to achieve $100 million in revenue by next year, and an IPO remains 2 to 3 years away. That's pretty fast growth for 6 years, though, to be in that run rate.
Yep. Agreed.
Assuming they're not sitting at 50 and saying, hey, we'll be 100 next year, and really stretching the truth, which is always possible on these press releases.
I mean, that's sometimes typical, but as long as the market keeps growing at the rate it's growing, they'll hit it by the end of the year, next year.
At the end of next year, so 2 calendar years away.
Right. App Omni closes $40 million funding round led by Scale Venture Partners. Now, I know the App Omni folks. I mean, this is really going after the SaaS security space. It's really their play, and we all know that we're seeing more of this with the move to the cloud. So, it's an opportune time for them to kind of tap into some of this momentum. This is a Series B for them, which means they're tracking pretty well as a company. Clear Sky was in the original round, and we know Jay and Patrick over there, they've done a couple other investments in other companies I advise. So a good round there for them.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah,
Israel.
This one's a super cool space. The whole protection of SaaS services is a very difficult space because if you think about it from a technical how do you do it standpoint, it's an outside in, you got to be in line kind of protection mechanism, unless you have some kind of API permissions or the ability to get in the SaaS product and look at configurations from an inside out model. It's just this space has always thrown me for a loop because I'm not sure how to innovate in it. I'm not sure how to do it any differently than say Zscaler or one of these guys have done it. And it could be 100% could be a gap in my knowledge of the market. Like I definitely admit to that. But watching how this space innovates could be super key, because if somebody comes up with something unique here, they could really run over this one.
And I
agree
think
with
they're
that.
using APIs into the SaaS platforms to, I think that's their approach here at App Omni, instead of being inline like a Zscaler.
And that 100% is the innovation level that I'm talking about, that if you can innovate at a unique way like that and get insights that the outside in view can't generate, then Series B is just your start.
Yeah, and SaaS is a serious issue. We've known that SaaS is going to be a huge play, but you also run into, like you said, there's hard problems to solve there because you have so many integrations, not just with SaaS, but you have SAML, you've got Federation to think about, you've got their development and in-house development and applications around those that are probably hooking APIs that may have APIs across multiple SaaS providers and a homegrown app. So it is a hard problem, and it's only getting more complex as time goes. So soon as we do see some good innovation there, that's when we're going to see, I think, some very big valuations and some companies really take off.
Yeah. Next up, Israeli cybersecurity startup Perception Point raises $28 million. This is an interesting company because they're going after the communication platforms, and it's not just email. It looks like it's social media, it's data storage. It looks like they're trying to cover a lot of different angles here on these collaboration channels. Is kind of their positioning here.
Again, that's a great market play to make right now, especially with all of the information in these, not just SaaS platforms, but communication platforms. You think about how many documents that have sensitive information that are within inside of Slack or any of the chat apps. If you can figure out good ways to provide some insight into that, solve some security problems, and then release a product that's going to give you some visibility and API level access that's doing interesting things. Again, that's a huge win, and I think that's a big, that's probably a small amount of money that we will probably see for these guys in the near future.
And is it a disruption of DLP? It could be a disruption of DLP if we talk about data loss and data loss prevention, right? You guys are looking at content-based real-time protection across multi-channels. It could be disruptive to DLP in the longer term.
Well, and I think this is just another nail in the coffin, right, for DLP. Like DLP has been dead on the traditional network anyway, and this is just adding to the fact that the lack of visibility and ability to control anything in a corporate network. Add SaaS on top of that, and you're kind of finishing the nail. And if they can capitalize on both areas where they're getting some of the enterprise and some of the in-house on-prem solutions as part of their SaaS protection model, man, this will kill it.
Right. Because if you think about DLP and the challenges, right, at best it was trying to protect the perimeter. Now we've moved to all these channels that are outside the organization. I mean, Tyler Robinson, to your point, probably the final nail to the coffin. It might be an extra nail into the coffin because I think the final nail already happened. But now you see innovation where people are really starting to look at these other channels as a way to try to protect, because they proliferated, right? On any given day, I have no less than 3 different messenger apps open. Think about that. No less than 3. Sometimes it's 4. And all the files and communications that are happening on those platforms that might be bypassing traditional security controls.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole premise of people trying to move to SaaS applications. Is it's one of the big fundamental problems getting solved, supposedly, is they're provided more granular control through the SaaS application dashboard or single pane of glass that platform's providing. But like you said, you've got no less than 3. And so being able to do that across multiple SaaS applications becomes huge. And if you can do that and you can show a good use case where you can control data by moving to a SaaS application and having some of that visibility and control the DLP would offer to a traditional on-prem, that's just one more, like you said, that's a double tap. That's a double nail right to the coffin. And I think it just solidifies the hybrid environment that everybody's kind of moving to. We've seen a shift to the cloud. We've seen a shift back from the cloud where there's a hybrid adoption and people are doing both in a more smart manner now. So I think it's not going to go away where you have on-prem, but doing it in places that make sense is really kind of where a lot of companies are moving to.
Yeah. This next one is interesting. AirEye raises $8 million Series A to extend network security into the unprotected digital airspace. Two things here I want to note for sure. One, this is U.S. venture partners, which has been very successful in funding rounds in the cybersecurity industry. I know a number of the partners over there. But what's really interesting to me is this concept of the digital corporate airspace and the ability to protect that. I'm not exactly sure how they do it, but it's a very interesting area that I don't think many people are focused on.
There was a company about, I don't even know how long ago now, probably close to 8 to 10 years ago, called Bastille Networks, that was founded by one of the former X-Force guys from back in the IBM days. Anyways, they did a similar thing where I don't know if it's how these guys do it, but they were able to monitor, detect kind of the usage of the airspace within your environment, and they could literally watch you walk around your office. And if you left your phone in one location, they could triangulate it, know where it is, track it for you, tell you where it is, all from a remote vantage point across all different bands, right? 5G, 4G, LTE, Wi-Fi, all the different ones. And so I think conceptually it's a really interesting idea to see if there's bugs, things planted in your network. But I think what could be the only thing that I worry about here is that the threats, are they real? Are they as real and as often as would necessitate a high cost thing like a solution like this? And that's what did Bastille in 10 years ago, because they weren't, right? The risk wasn't there, so nobody was buying the product. And I wonder if that risk has ever materialized.
I think that's my bigger concern, just quickly, Tyler Robinson, is how much stuff is going to be on the corporate network versus in the coffee shops and at the homes, and how does this solution address this very shift in the workforce? And if it's only at the corporate level, and that corporate level is a third of what it was, does it limit their total addressable market?
Or potentially if they have a small enough device that was portable, right? To let you take.
I think it is. It's more of an agent-based. From what I know about the company, the original platform was an agent-based that was designed to integrate into like GPO or corporate policy on endpoint devices. And if that hasn't changed, where they're just protecting the network based on corporate policy, I don't know. That's not a huge play. And even just protecting the airspace in general, like you talk about things like Air Marshal or Meraki or Ubiquiti, all of these have the ability to do triangulation. They do rogue access point mitigation and detection. They do policy-based protection on the endpoint. And from what I can read on the website is they're basically enforcing compliance or mandated security wireless policies down to endpoints, which from a work from home, that's a great thing. But we've had this ability for 20 plus years via, GPOs, via endpoint or wireless clients, via VPN, MDM, like all the MDM management, Intune policies, AirWatch, all of these much more mature products have had this capability, and most corporations have the wireless configuration under control and pretty well locked down if they're doing it right. Again, we do see huge gaps where they're not doing it right and policies are not enforced or done properly, or MDM's not configured well. Those are different problems. If they're simply focusing on pushing down security policies and mandating, visibility to the wireless space, like that's pretty well solved. And most of these platforms have been rolled out for the better part of a decade. You look at Aruba; they've been pretty much corporate for 2 decades. So hopefully there's something more innovative there.
Yeah, let's hope so. A couple more quick funding announcements. CyberHat secures $15 million to expand its Bro, enterprise-level cybersecurity protection to small and medium-sized businesses. This is SOC as a platform solution, so it looks like it's going after the security operations incident response side. Looks like small to medium business here. I don't know much about Cyber.
I was hoping that was Cyber Bro. Like, really, if it was Cyber Bro, like, I might have to have a second look, but I can't even pronounce this Cyber Bro.
I read it as Cerebro, a takeoff on the X-Men thing, but I don't know if that's
yeah, you're better at that than I am. Cygent announces 7.6 million Series A funding round. In-Q-Tel, CyberJunction, and Westwave Capital. This looks very federal focused. CMMC capabilities, managed services. Looks like federal focused.
Yeah, In-Q-Tel, like right off the bat, you're seeing like 7.6 million in In-Q-Tel involved is definitely going to be some kind of FedRAMP or cyber focus with inside the Fed space.
Yep. And then the last funding round, Acunox secures 4.6 million in seed funding to meet growing demand for zero trust Kubernetes security solutions. There's zero trust again, but this is very Kubernetes. This is going to be more on the orchestration layer.
Isn't Kubernetes, though, isn't the fundamental idea of Kubernetes the kind of zero trust model and more containerized orchestration platform that is leveraging zero trust? Are we like getting almost incestuous here with the level of zero trust and the level of granularity where we're putting this control?
Yeah, so this is what gets interesting about Kubernetes a little bit, is Kubernetes has some built-in capabilities in itself, but we've also seen a bunch of security companies. I mean, StackRock's really pivoted from containers to Kubernetes. Soluble was going after Kubernetes. Here's another one going after Kubernetes, but Kubernetes has its own capabilities too. So how many of these solutions do I need if Kubernetes is providing me some capabilities, and then my container security companies that are potentially running in my container environments are doing that? Have we gone too far with startups in the Kubernetes space? Maybe.
Yeah, I think it's already complex, right? Like you start to talk about containers, and then you add orchestration on top of containers that is containerized. Like it becomes granularly more complex, and I think that's where companies are trying to get to that place where they see the compute advantages, but they have no idea how to address the complexity and the understanding. So if they have a simple push button from an application or a SaaS provider or some security solution that just does the complex security things for them, and they can leverage the compute of advantages, that's where I guess I could see some play in that space. But I really think that's kind of going past the point where we should be leveraging the platform and the security enhancements that are built in the way they're designed to use. That's configuration versus bolting on more complexities to make something secure. We've seen that not work for several decades.
Yes, since the 90s when I got into the space. These last two articles, we announced IPOs last week. I thought the first article was very interesting. Darktrace has reportedly slashed its valuation estimate ahead of its planned IPO, which I believe is going to be Monday on the London Stock Exchange. The valuation went from $5 billion US down to somewhere between 3.3 to 3.7 billion. So that's just before an IPO comes out. To see that is a little interesting, to be like, yeah, maybe you valued your IPO price a little too high. The converse, go ahead.
I was going to say, before you get to the converse, read the drama in there. It's straight out of, Housewives of Atlanta or whatever, right? Whatever the latest version of that is, because there's the rest of that article talks about someone affiliated with Darktrace, also affiliated with Invoke Capital, technology advisory investment firm, that according to this article, Mike Lynch, his name, is fighting an extradition bid from the U.S. after being accused of fraud linked to an $11 billion sale of a company called Autonomy to HP. So I'm sure that doesn't help valuation either.
Yeah, that's for sure. Maybe nobody wants to touch it. Now, the converse is NoBefore went IPO and actually exceeded their share price expectation. It was priced at $16 a share. It hit the market just under 20 at $19.95. And if I'm not mistaken, it's almost 25. It's $24.87 right now in the open market. So NoBefore had a very successful IPO last week.
That's just
Yeah,
insane.
that's
like seeing how that company has went from where they're at, and what they offer. Like they do a good job. They have they have a niche that is a scratch that has not been been scratched very well by anybody in the market. But just from a social engineering, phishing, and security awareness training company, and where they've went, like that's crazy that this is the level of valuation for an IPO for a product that just does that. Like it tells you where we're at still, having to deal with things such as phishing and spam and security awareness training. Like that's mind-boggling that is what the valuation is.
Yeah, and
Yes.
the trailers for some of their training stuff, so the Inside Man training stuff that they do, which is really cool. The trailers out on YouTube has almost 20,000 views on YouTube.
That's insane. Like, I mean, good for them. They've done a great job, and it's something that's been needed. But there's been a ton of other companies I think have done a better job at that. They just did not go that big, and I think some of that comes with name and clout, and just some of the some of the fanboy attitude around the founders and some of the acquisitions that they did early on. That was important for them to kind of make that headway that quickly. Like it was not very long that it's taken them to get to this point.
Put out
Yeah.
good content and get good growth. That's basically what the storyline is on that business.
Yeah, and look, they've been a sponsor of Cyber Risk Alliance. They've never been a Security Weekly sponsor, but I know their goals. For them, it was all lead generation campaigns, right? I mean, they drove a lead pipeline, they nurtured that lead pipeline, they converted those deals, and grew that company pretty quickly with that marketing approach. And it worked for them. It doesn't work for everybody, but it definitely seems to have worked for them.
I would love to see that framework and kind of the whole business model. Like if someone does a talk or an interview around that would be fascinating to see kind of some of those decisions and how they were able to achieve that. Because like you said, that does not work very well for most companies, especially in the cybersecurity space. Like we get pitched all day, we see this stuff all the time, and we traditionally don't go with the most expensive company, and they're definitely one of the higher end companies from a cost perspective. So I would love to see that.
We'll see if we can pull that off. Thank you, Tylers, for joining me on the news segment today. We're going to take a short break and then air our pre-recorded interview with Joseph Carson from Thycotic.